Hey everybody, this is Debbie Levitt from P-Type, short for prototype, and you can find us at pty.pe, and I'm one of Acture's recommended trainers and a big fan, and a lot of people are starting to ask me about Acture version 9, and I have to say it's not something I've gotten used to yet, but in order to show you some of the differences between Acture 8 and Acture 9, we're going to do one of the simplest exercises that I teach whether you buy my video courses or you get training with me, like when I go into companies. This is one of the simplest lessons that I teach, and it has to do with some checkboxes. It's really the first time that we take a look at some interactions with conditional logic. So this is the way that I normally build it, and I've done a little pre-building here to save some time. So we have checkboxes, they've got names, check all checkbox, and each of these fruits. And the idea is when you check the check all checkbox, it's going to check all the fruits. If you uncheck it, it's going to uncheck it, and then we'll say if we uncheck one of these, it would uncheck this one, of course, because it wouldn't still stay checked if we unchecked one of these. So let's build that in 8. Then we're going to build the identical thing in 9 so you can see where it's different. So I'm going to start by doing an on-click, and you'll learn if you work with me that I do the on-click because if you do on-selected and on-unselected, you can sometimes get an unintended domino effect. So here I'm going to say that when the check all checkbox is checked, I want these guys to all be checked, and that in Acture that is set selected true. So set selected true would be check the checkbox, set selected false would be uncheck the checkbox, and I'm going to give this a condition if this is selected true, which means if people click, so remember our action was click, if people click on the checkbox and they are checking it off, then check off these dudes. I can say okay. So that's what my case looks like in Acture 8. It's made up of this little tree icon and a lightning bolt to indicate action. So if I press enter or double click, I get this again and I can make some changes to it. I can also quickly copy and paste this. So copy paste, and now I can make kind of the opposite of this. So what if they have clicked on this and they are intending to uncheck all the boxes? Now we have to go in and say, okay, this one is unchecked. This one is unchecked. It's a little bit boring, may not be exciting to watch. I'll make it as exciting as I can. But then we have to manually say each of these becomes unchecked. Now, I said clear the condition because it's binary. Either they checked it where this condition is met, or they unchecked it. That's it. Now, I could go ahead and write a condition if I want. I could say if selected of this equals false, but in Acture 8, I don't have to. I can just say do this or else do this, and Acture will decide one of these conditions is met and take care of it. Now, the next thing I might want to do is I might want to say if somebody unchecks apples, so we might say on unselected, we don't have to use the click. If apples is somehow unselected, we want the check all checkbox to be unchecked. Uncheck, check all. I know these are a little bit of a tongue twister. So that would be set selected of the check all checkbox to false. So let's take a look. Let's give it a preview and see what it looks like. So this would be checking all of them, unchecking all of them. So that works. Now if I check all of them and I happen to uncheck apples, it unchecks the check all checkbox without undoing everything else. And of course, we could build further. We could copy that case over to bananas, kiwis, strawberries, so that if you wanted to uncheck any of these, I hit copy on my keyboard, paste, paste, paste. Let's do it. Paste. So now if we wanted to uncheck any of these, the same thing would work. I could uncheck kiwis and it would just uncheck the check all. And this, again, this is just for realism. If we're building an Acture, we're building for realism. Otherwise, we could use some other lesser tool, but this is part of why I love Acture. And again, sometimes I teach people as a more advanced thing to how to use a listener, an automatically running process, to constantly check for something like, are all 4 of these checked? If so, then check the check all checkbox. So we're not going to do that. We're just going to do the simplest version in Acture 8 and now in Acture 9, so you can see how it looks different, how it feels different, and where they made some changes. So I would say any questions, but this is a video. So let's sneak over to Acture 9. And I did the same thing. I set up my workspace with these checkboxes. I gave them names, and now we're going to build the same interactions. So I want to start with on-click. And for on-click, I want to do set selected. So notice we didn't get that case window. We have this kind of bar down the side where we pick our action. Now, instead of, again, opening up the case thing, we have to pick a target. Now, in our last, in Acture 8, we just had a bunch of checkboxes and we chose the ones that were relevant. Here, it's a little bit different. I have to say, well, if someone clicks on the check all checkbox, then they must be intending to take the strawberries checkbox and set it to true. Okay. And then I can add another target. So it's a target of the action. The action takes place on the kiwis checkbox. The action, I probably don't have to hit OK. The action takes place on the bananas checkbox. The action takes place on the apples checkbox. So now I have all of that the way we had it before. Now what we did last time in version 8 was we came up here kind of on the case level and we did a copy paste. But at this time, there's something in Acture that I perceive as a bug. I don't know how they perceive it, but if I do copy paste here, I don't get a whole new case. I get kind of an add-on to my existing case. That's not what I intended. So what I would have to do here is add our conditional logic. So remember, we added logic before to say, hey, wait a minute, we're saying that people are clicking on the checkbox, but are they clicking on the checkbox to check it? Or are they clicking on the checkbox to uncheck it? These are different intentions. That's why they're different cases. So here it says enable cases. Now in Acture 8, this wasn't enabling a case. This was building on conditional logic. So I will say this is if checked, and I can add my logic. And Acture gets it right here. It's if selected if this is true, meaning if they checked the check all checkbox. So I can say OK. So here's what the cases look like now. So if checked is the what I named it, and they're telling me this is the logic, if selected if this equals true, and then here's the action that's going to happen. Let me flick back to 8 just so you can get an idea of the visual difference there. So flipping back to 8, this looked like this, where this is the name of the case and the condition, and this is the action taken. So definitely very different. So now let's say, luckily in this case, I can copy paste this. So on my keyboard, I'm saying copy. On my keyboard, I'm saying paste. And now I can go in and change the case and change the action so that when people uncheck the check all checkbox, we get a bunch of unchecked boxes. So I can click on this. Now notice there's no way to remove this logic. I don't seem to be able to say, hey, take the logic off this thing. I'm right clicking on it and I don't think delete will do what I'm thinking. So there's no way to remove this at this time. I would just have to write, let me see, can I remove it from here and just say okay? Okay, so that worked, but it wasn't totally clear to me at first because there was a different way to do it in 8. So again, I can still do it, just a different way. Now, how about changing these checkbox target actions? Before we had the checkboxes and then we had a drop menu. So let's see how it works this time. This time I have to click on strawberries. I have to find this true and change it to false. And then I have to find this kiwis and change it to false. Oops, I hit toggle. I have a slippery mouse. That's not Acture's fault. Then I have to find this guy and change it to false. And then I've got to get apples and change it to false. And now I'm done. So there we go. We should now have the two cases that we have just like we had in Acture 8. So again, here they are in 9. Here they are in 8. And they should do exactly the same thing. Now, the last thing we built was we came over to apples and we built an on unselected case for this guy. So on unselected, what's going to happen? The check all checkbox is going to be selected false, so it can look unchecked because one of our choices was unchecked. So we can say okay to that. So let's give it a preview. and see if our stuff is working. So this should check everybody off, and then clicking it again should uncheck everybody. And if we check everybody off and then we uncheck apples, there you go. So can we do that quick copy and paste like we did in Acture 8? So here I can say copy, and I'm doing that on my keyboard so you can't see it, but I believe I'm on Windows, so here's a right click and I can say copy. And then I should be able to go to bananas and say paste, kiwis and say paste, strawberries and say paste. So let's do a quick refresh and make sure that the other ones work. And there we go. There we go. So again, for people who are coming from Acture 8, you should be able to do all the things you've been doing in 8 in 9, and certainly there's some new features in 9 as well. If you're coming from 8, this is definitely going to feel like a little bit of a learning curve, since there are things that have been moved, there are things that are in new places, and things that you just have to kind of discover, like, hey, strawberries checkbox, this looks like music equalizer. What does this icon actually mean? And it turns out it's some of the things that used to be in the properties panel. So again, for those of you used to Acture 8, you are used to, let's flip back to 8 and grab one of these checkboxes. And you are used to these things being over here in properties, things like tooltip and alignment. And instead, that was kind of hiding under here, under music equalizer fader guy. And so again, these things do exist, but in some cases they've been moved to new places. For those of us coming from Acture 8, surprising places. And there's also some things that might not be totally obvious to people who are coming from 8, which because a lot of stuff is gray on gray. I wear glasses, so I don't always notice it. So there's this, which would be I want to add another action to this particular case. So say, for example, this case, in addition to setting selected or checked, does something else, whatever it is, and now we have some sort of a case. This would be technically, if you think about it from Acture 8 terms, this is a case with 2 lightning bolts, but of course this isn't as obvious as it used to be in Acture 8, where, let's do the same thing. I can come in and say, in addition to doing this, it also does this, like this, and this. And so this is the case with 2 lightning bolts, or 2 actions in Acture 8. This is a case with 2 actions in Acture 9. So just a little heads up for people who are considering Acture 9 or transitioning from 8 to 9. This obviously is not the only place where you're going to find differences or changes or new interfaces or things being done in a slightly different way than you're used to, but hopefully this is a good introduction to some of how things have changed. Those of you who have already downloaded 9 will notice that I have rearranged my panes to look more like 8. So the panes don't naturally come in these orders and layout. I've changed it so that it matches more of the Acture 8 workspace. And that's just a personal choice for me. So let's end this video here so it doesn't go on forever. That is just a little introduction to some of the difference between Acture 8 and 9. I'm certainly still training people on Acture 8, and I will of course be training people on Acture 9 because again, I can give you all of the same lessons that I've always been doing. I've got my core skills class, I have my advanced skills class, and my mobile app specific class. These are all available. Again, hit pty.pe to learn more about our Acture training and bring me into your company to get everybody up to speed, because as you can see, even though some of the user interface has been changed in 9, there are definitely some things that aren't obvious and intuitive to the new user. So a little training may go a long way. Thanks for listening, and catch you later.